So Shane asked me to quickly share about, how to, I guess a lot of groups don't realize Zoom just recently changed their settings, basically rolled them out to everybody that is on a single license account. Which is most of our groups and stuff like that. So now the password is required, and you can't even change that. And the waiting room is enabled. And I don't remember if that was changeable, but we'll check that in a second. I think that is changeable, actually. So I'm going to actually share my screen and show you. I am actually, I set up a meeting for my home group, which meets on Monday nights, based out of East Hampton, Connecticut, if anybody wants to join. And so this is it. I set it up because it's every Monday. So I set it up, and you see it's a recurring meeting. But just for, well, I'll go into that one first, and then I'll just go through it, creating a new one really quickly. So what I'm going to do, this is the next one. I'm going to go in, and I'm going to click on it, and here's the settings for it. And, well, it didn't look like this a minute ago, but I'm going to go in and edit this meeting. This is what you would do. And if you have it recurring on a weekly basis or whatever the case may be, it'll ask you if you want to edit only this meeting or all recurring meetings. And I'm going to do all meetings. So this is the recurrence. And you can see that it's set up for every week on Monday until May 25th. I was a little hopeful that the stay-at-home order would be lifted by the end of May, and I'm probably going to have to edit that to extend this a little longer, but I can do that later. And when I get down here to the meeting password, you'll see that this is now checked, and you can see I can't uncheck that, and there'll be a password here. What I did is I chose to actually set a password that I can remember easily enough. I chose recovery. It doesn't have to be numbers. It can be. You can set it to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like this one was here today. I'm just putting in recovery just for the heck of it for now. I do have the option of my waiting room is off. I can turn that on or off. I'm going to leave that off just because we don't know who might enter the meeting. I may not know everybody that comes to the meeting, and that's normal under any circumstances. So once I hit save here and I come back here, you'll now see that there's a meeting password and it's recovery, and I can invite attendees. And the URL now has this, after the meeting ID number, has the question mark and then PWD equals, and then this long string. That's actually the password recovery. That's been hashed, and that's an encryption terminology that I won't get into that. So all I really need to do is right-click on that and copy the link address, and now I can either send that to my web servant if I'm posting that up on a website somewhere, on our meeting list, on our regional meeting list, or post it in Facebook or whatever the case may be. I can also, obviously just give people the password itself for those that are typing in the number in the meeting ID. So, I mean, that's pretty simple. I'm actually going to go back to, so if I wanted to schedule a new meeting, and I think, I'll just call it my meeting. This is something Shane wanted to point out too. Normally, if you just scheduled a single meeting for a single day and time, it's going to have, again, the password is going to be there. And unless you manually change it, it's going to be just some random string of numbers. So I'm just going to leave this set for today at 12 p.m. It's Eastern time. That's where I live on the East Coast. And I'll just go through, again, I want to uncheck the waiting room. That's me personally. Oh, I guess I have to actually enter something in here. Let's just put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in, and I will uncheck the waiting room, and I'll hit save. Now, this is great, except that this meeting is only for this one time. So that password is only good for this single time of the meeting. If you're setting up a recovery meeting in Zoom, what you really want to do is make sure it's a recurring meeting, and either schedule it for the specific day and time. If it's weekly on a Sunday at whatever, you can do that. Or you can also just choose no fixed time. And this way it doesn't end at all. And this generated ID will stay until you physically delete it from your account. And the same thing, the password will be the same for all of the meetings. And then I'll save. And
hey, before you get too far, can you scroll back up a little bit? So guys, what I really wanted you to be able to see is that you see how you have your PMI, which is your personal meeting ID, right? That everybody knows. You know, if you can click on that instead of a new generated ID. You see that your generated ID is different than the personal meeting ID. So you might want to keep your same personal meeting ID that you've always had, and you have the option to change the password right underneath there to what your normal password is.
Yep.
And you just, in recurrence, you choose no fixed time. That way, nothing for your meeting changes right now. You just have to send out a new link to wherever you've posted your link, and everybody knows, oh, that's Adam's home group 740-661-1007. You know, that's what the main thing I wanted to point out is if you don't choose no fixed time, it will only give you a new generated ID option.
Yep.
Do you understand? Can you show them the difference, Adam, if you change from no fixed time to like 1 week?
Yeah, that's
boom. So
that's
see what happened? All the options changed because you didn't choose no fixed time. You have to choose no fixed time in order to be able to use your same PMI.
Oh, if you want to use your PMI.
Yeah, if you want to use your same personal meeting address that you've been using the entire time.
If that's the address you've been using.
Correct.
Yeah,
correct.
I personally have been instructing people not to use their personal meeting ID because that's yours and it never, well, you can change it, but under normal circumstances, it wouldn't change. Whereas you might want a different one for this group or for that group or whatever the case may be. But it's all preferences, personal preferences at that point, not Zoom preferences. But I also, you know what, just to stay away from some of the Zoom bombing or the misuse of the account, I've actually, on my home group, I unchecked enable join before host. Because if you enable join before host and it's a recurring meeting, somebody can get into that at any time and just start using it. So I've unchecked that so that personally I have to go in and start my home group's meeting. I also have, you know, so it's just, again, it's a personal preference. I have a pretty small home group, so it hasn't mattered yet. And I go in, I make sure I start it. We start at 7:30. I come in, I make sure I start the group at 7 o'clock so that from 7 to 7:30 people can get in and fellowship a little bit like that.
Adam, is there any way to make that screen a little bit bigger? Some people are having a little bit of trouble seeing
sure.
it.
There you go.
Better?
Yeah, much better.
Yeah, and to answer the questions that Matt answered in the chat, but Steph and some other members had, if you send out a clickable link, which is a one-click join, regardless of whether you have the password embedded or not, as long as it's a one-click join, people will be brought straight into the meeting without the password.
That's definitely what Zoom has said. However, like I mentioned earlier, before we started the session today, I had people call me last night to say that even though they were clicking on the clickable link on our website, that they were still being asked for a password. So we're not exactly sure if that was just Zoom trying to finalize all the settings properly, or Zoom screwing something up by telling us that the existing links would still work when they aren't, or possibly the person went in and actually edited their meeting and regenerated, like I did with my home group a minute ago. They actually went into their settings and resaved it with the embedded password link. So now the old link won't work, possibly.
No, that's correct. And something else that Jonathan mentioned yesterday is that because Zoom is playing catch up,
yep,
it just may not have been updated for some accounts yet, and it'll take a couple of days. So the best practice that we can offer you guys right now is to do what Adam just showed, is to create a whole new link with the password embedded and send that out to everyone, or simply share your password, because you know, that's not going to stop from getting trolled. The only thing that's going to get you stop from really getting trolled is your meeting settings and your co-hosts and their capability. I
We
mean,
have some waiting room questions, like how long before does the waiting room open? How long before the meeting, stuff like that.
You know, I really haven't used the waiting room. I believe though, it's.
I got the answer for that.
Oh, you got to go ahead, Al.
Yeah, I actually, because I attended a meeting the day before yesterday where there was a waiting room. What happens is you're brought into a screen that's a make-believe waiting room that says that a host will be with you shortly, where now you're waiting for the host, or I would assume a co-host is going to go to the waiting room, say, okay, Hal looks okay, let him in, or don't let him in. It's like you're in like a holding pattern, for lack of a better term. And if it's turned on for that particular meeting, it's there for the duration of the meeting. So, you know, if you're going to be using the waiting room, you probably want to try your best to have a co-host that's their sort of tasked with that. Because yesterday I asked the host of the particular meeting, another NA group that was running the meeting, I popped in on it to see what it was about. And I was in, he allowed me in to the meeting, the group itself, the meeting itself, within like maybe 45 seconds, which was not bad at all. And I had asked him, I said, well, what about at the beginning of the meeting when, you know, it's a 9 o'clock meeting and 60 people try to join? And he said, it doesn't take long to go through the list and let the people in that you believe you want to let in. But that's what the waiting room is.
Yeah, so the question, just to reiterate, some people had asked how soon before the meeting does the waiting room begin? It doesn't. The host has to have started the meeting in order for the waiting room to be active.
Correct.
So you aren't allowed to have both enable join before host and enable waiting room at the same time. It's one or the other, or none. You could have none, but you
Andrew also said that
host.
the host can click admit everyone that's in the waiting room. So if he wants to let all 10 or 200 people in at one time, he could do that, which sort of like defeats the purpose of a waiting room, I would guess, but that's entirely up to the host.
Well, I mean, the only thing I can see the benefit of a waiting room is if they're trying to get, like, if the host wants to co-host everybody before everybody gets in to try and prevent anything from happening in that process. That's the only benefit I can really see from an actual waiting room, because it makes no
Good
sense
point.
if the host is online anyway, is to just
Very
get the
good point.
host and the co-hosts in order so that nothing really happens as soon as everybody starts bombarding into the meeting.
Yeah, and if you've looked at any of the Zoom tutorials on that talk about the waiting room or any of the instructional stuff, they mention that's usually the typical use of it. If somebody is having a large meeting, you know, obviously Zoom, a lot of their material is geared toward businesses using Zoom. So they'll say, you know, the host and co-hosts, whoever, you know, you might have 2 or 3 people presenting during a meeting who would then be your co-host. So you might bring them into the meeting while everybody else is still in the waiting room. So you can kind of line everything up and share some of the practices you're going to go through, and then let everybody into the meeting when you're ready to go.
Yeah, there was also 2 or 3 comments or questions in the chat that is sort of like hedged on, okay, well, if we publicize the embedded password link to the meeting, how are we as a fellowship, I guess, dealing with the bombers as they do go in? And I think Adam and also Shane could definitely address, okay, well, we put this into place, which basically not eliminated, but minimized their damage to an ongoing meeting.
well, yeah, and to be clear, like, we didn't ask for this. All right. Like they decided as a business, they were going to do this because who this protects is not people like us, because we publicly send and intentionally publicly send all of our information out to be found. So who this protects are classrooms, businesses, and things that don't publicly share their Zoom ID. And it just keeps someone from putting in a random ID, which is how a lot of places were being found, is they were just putting in a random Zoom ID and seeing if it worked. And if they got in, then they would go get all their buddies and come back and they would hit it. So it protects them because there's you know, they're not sharing their Zoom ID to begin with. Really, there's two Zoom IDs is what it really is. I mean, it's, you gotta have the original ID, and then you gotta have the password. But for us, it doesn't change anything. The only way that we can mitigate risk is with the host settings and your co-hosts reacting in the meeting real time. It just made our job harder. And also, to be clear, like if you have the not the pro account, but the other one, like the pro account with 10 hosts or whatever, theirs are set up different. You know, Adam said that at the beginning. It's only the single pro account users and free accounts that are having to deal with this password stuff.
Yeah, you know what? And I asked Matt if he's still here. I asked Matt to check last night because I know Southeast Zonal Forum has 3 licenses on their account. So they would not fall into the single license account. And as of last night, Zoom had not changed their settings. So
you're saying you can join, you can pair up with somebody else as long as you don't have to get the 10 accounts?
Well, no, you could just have a second account, and I'll show you that really quickly because I walked through that with somebody.
Yeah, show us that.
Again, if somebody wants to, but I don't think this is going to show my credit card, but let's hope not.
I got my screen capture on. I got you covered.
I promise we won't share it.
If you log into Zoom here, and you go down this admin section, right, and you go to account management, and then into billing. You'll see that I have an active subscription that allows 1 host. Okay, if I just go to add and edit here, I can make 1 into 2. You'll see it's going to tell me that it's going to prorate my account because it renews on April 25th, not on April 5th here, right? So, and I could just hit continue. I'm actually using PayPal, I think, so it'll automatically, or however, it's automatically in my account already. I can hit continue, and now I have multiple licenses on my 1 account. And and again, as far as Zoom is concerned, that's not what they were locking down. I haven't decided to spend the extra $15 myself yet. Oh, what the hell, let's do it. So I just went through and I upgraded it. There's my address. I think I'm listed. It's okay. So now let's see what happens if I go back to my account here. Well, I got to move a little window here. So let's see if I go back into admin now into, what is it? Not room management. Not there either. If I go into account management and account settings, let's see if I now have the ability to unlock the password. Not yet. It's still locked for me, but
Well,
that may change later.
Update too.
What's that?
It might take some time to update because
it might take some time, but this is what's happened. See, so I'm in the admin settings of the account, and these are all locked even to the admin. I can't change these. But now that I just bought a second license, maybe it'll unlock for me later today, or it'll take a little while to go through. This was something we were attempting to check that I mentioned last night on a couple of Facebook groups about maybe I'll test it. Well, I guess I just tested it, and we'll see later. We'll report back to everybody if that worked.
Here's a good question. Does the embedded link make it easier to control the bombers? So like a reverse question, but yeah, you know what they're getting at.
I don't think it does because it's got the password in it. So it's a one-click link. They just can't see the password. But I mean, for us, it's just that you don't need to see it. That's up to the individual because it's a 2-step process. If you click the old link and need the password when you get to the second screen.